the first session is about SQL Assessment, Microsoft Best Practice Checker. Our speaker for tonight is Ali, Microsoft MVP for Data Platform based in US. You can find him on Twitter using SQL Worldwide handle. He also handles the database group, database fundamentals. Is it correct, Tao? The meetup for database fundamentals, right?
Yeah, it's a virtual group. When past is the operation, we call it now a DBA virtual group.
Mm-hmm.
We meet twice a month, second Wednesday and the fourth Wednesday of the month.
All right. So with that, I'm gonna pass the floor to Tao.
Okay, thank you so much. I think this is my third time, speaking to your group. One was a larger event, and I think there was another user group meeting that I was able to attend. So it's nice. I don't take this lightly. I know you have a choice of many speakers, and I do appreciate this opportunity. So I will get started. We have about 47 minutes. And thanks to those who joined. So you can put your questions in the chat. I do not have any slide for this talk. It's all demo. I'll also share my contact as Pio said. If I do not answer any question, or once you download my code, if you have any follow-up questions, comments, please do reach out. I do definitely answer your questions, maybe not right away. Just bear with me for a day or two, but I'll definitely follow up with you. So I'm sure you read the abstract. I'm not going to read that. And again, thanks for inviting. So why would you listen to this talk, right? Because it's a busy day. Pio said it's rainy, gloomy in Singapore, so you have to have a reason to, after a full day of work, to listening to me, right? And if you are working with SQL Server on Azure VM, or Azure SQL managed instance, and you want to follow some of the best practices that has been recommended by Microsoft engineers, especially in the CAT team, in the customer advisory team, in the customer service team, you probably want to make sure that your servers are following those best practices, because they've been dealing with servers all around the world. They see different settings, and they have some idea what's optimal for you. So what they did is they came up with these rule sets, and they came up with 2 PowerShell commands that we can run against our environment, and we can find out if things are following the best practices and not. Now, I know if you are working with SQL Server for a while, there will be edge cases that a recommendation from Microsoft is probably not optimal for that particular environment, either based on the application or based on the workload. So you can always modify the baseline rules. You can put your override thresholds. You can also create your own rules, and we'll look at all of those. You can also bring third-party rules set, right? Just be careful that you test it before you deploy it in production. Now, what are the environments are supported that you can run these rule sets against? SQL Server 2012 and higher, Azure Virtual Machines, Managed Instance, and if you're running on Linux, you can do that too. And as you see in my screen, that I'm not using Management Studio or PowerPoint, I'm using a tool called Azure Data Studio. That's not the topic of this talk, but if you're not familiar, please look it up. This is a very lightweight tool based on extensions. It's a multi-platform. You can use it to manage some aspect of of your SQL Server and your Azure SQL resources from here. The other good part is using a notebook. As you can see, I'm using a notebook here. I can have pictures. I can have my comments, And then I can also run code and save it and send it to other people. I'm using their different kernels. But enough on that. If you're not using it, look it up. There is a new extension on SQL Server Assessment. So whatever I'm going to show you is mostly PowerShell code. If you don't like it, if you say, no, I don't want to code, there is something at the end I'll show you if we have time. Totally GUI based from the extension. You can do that too. So these are a couple of the notebooks that I'm going to be using for demo purpose, and all those are all in my GitHub repo. I'll send a link to the organizers later on, and I'm sure they can share that with you. And you can download and you can use it. I also put some references here. These are all URLs. If you want to read more, if you want to download some of the sample codes from Microsoft, you can do that. And these are some of my contacts. So if you just remember this one word, you'll find me in everywhere, and you can definitely contact me later on. So let's just start with the first one. So I talked about this rule set that's been released by Microsoft. So what are these? What are these rules look like? So let's take a look. And being a SQL Server person, my strength is on SQL Server. So what I did is I loaded all these rules into a SQL Server table in my local instance that's running on this laptop. And this is there is a CSV file. There is I think there's a JSON also. You can load from anyone you prefer. So first one is we have about 232 rules, and as you can see, this is a SQL kernel now I'm using. I had a PowerShell kernel. I moved to a SQL one. It's connected to my local named instance SQL 2019. And just running a select count. So there's 232 rules. So I'm just randomly picking the top 5. Each rule has an ID. It has item type. You can enable, disable it. It has a label. There's a description. There's also a help link for most of the rules, right? So you can go to the Microsoft documentation, what that rule is about, and you can read more. These tags are very useful. Each rule has one or multiple tags, and some doesn't have any tag, and I'll explain that. So with that rule, with this tag, we'll see later on that we can run rules based on the tag. So I might say, I do not want to run all the rules. Can I just run the rules that are tagged with performance, that are tagged with trace flag? And we'll see some of those when you get to the demo. And some of these are null, as you can see, because these are override rules. What does that mean? So they might have a base rule that apply for any SQL Server engine from 2012 and up, but then later on, maybe on a newer version, they came up with some other parameters that these only apply to 2016 or 19, not to the base rule of 2012 and 14. So that will be an override rule. There are 3 different target types, either is database, server, and then the overrules are null. So you have a scope. I can run a rule. A rule might have a scope of a server itself, or a rule can be in the scope of just a single database or all your user database. There are labels. So there are 2 critical, 33 information. Most of these are warnings at this time, and Microsoft is working on it. So those things might change in future for sure if they come up with new rules or modify existing one. There are 58 rules that you can only run on Windows. There are some you can run on both, right? So of course this 58 you cannot run on if you're running on a Linux system. Just so be aware of it. These are versions, right? So there are some rules only for Express Edition, some are on standard, some will run on premises, some also on the managed instance and on premises, just to give you a breakdown. These are SQL Server versions, as we know. So if it's a rule for a major version 11, means it will also run on 12 and 13. But if it's just on 13, like you see, there's 13 rules for 13, which is a coincidence. We cannot run these rules for 11 and 12. And some of these are my favorite. So it's don't take it personally. You might have your own. But I like some of these that I can run against hundreds and thousands of SQL Server and databases and get the recommendations, see if they're in compliant or they're not, right? So put your questions in the chat if I'm going too fast. If you have questions, let me know. So let's look at some of this, right? Before we go further, run few of this and see, what we can use this for. So first one is that you have to have this PowerShell module named SQL Server. There is a minimum version that you need. So once you have that, you can import it if you do not have auto import. So, and then I'm going to declare some variables here so I do not have to type this every time. And again, I'm using a SQL Server 2019, a named instance in my machine that's running on this laptop. Now, one thing is pretty cool. There is a deprecated feature rule, right? So if you're doing an upgrade, or if you're planning to do upgrade, right, or you're testing your upgrade in a lower environment, you might want to see what are the deprecated features that I have that I want to get rid of it, right? And I'm not going to, throughout this demo, I'm not going to read the output because that's really not the goal. You can go and look at it. My goal is to make you, a little bit aware of this tool and how you can use it in your environment and how you can take advantage. So we're not going to drill through individual rules and try to, and we are not going to talk about how to solve those problems. Right? That's probably out of the scope because some of these rules we can, there's like one with the temp-db size, right? The next one, right? We can talk about temp-db for an hour. So what is this one checking? Microsoft always recommend that all our temp-db files should be same size, right? But in the heat of the moment, people always, go and probably expand one individual file. And then once that operation is done, they forget to shrink it or bring it to the same size. So how can you check that, right? If you have hundreds of thousands of databases, if I run this command right now, I do not get anything, right? So let's go and make some changes. So I have this tsql command. Some of the stuff that, all my file sizes are 8 megabyte. I'm going to change one to 10 just for this demo purpose. And then let's see, what do we see here? Now, if I run this rule, it tells me that, gives me a warning that all my temp-db files are not of the same size, right? And if you go and revert that, you will not get this. I'm not going to do that right now. How about login equals password? So let's just revert that because we are here. If I create a login with the same password, and I want to go and find that across my environment, right? You can just run this one line command. It tells me that. Now I know I'm running this against a single server. I'll show you at the end, or at the end of the demo how you can run it against n number of servers. Duplicate indexes, unused indexes, right? So if we go again, I did write some code just for you to test this, so you can. This is a code sample. We'll be creating table and couple of indexes with the same definition but different name. And now, right, it even give you a name, table name, and say, there's already an index with the same column definition. Power plan. Many times I see this, right? And even if you open a case with Microsoft with performance related issues, they'll ask you this question: is your power plan set to optimal? The reason is, the power plans are there, and don't get me wrong, for environmental issue and not to use too much of electricity and cooling and all that. But if you look at the price that you pay for the license for a SQL Server, I don't think so. After I'm paying this much money, I'll be saving energy and not running my CPUs optimal, right? Especially if you're on a OLTP system. So you can run this against all your environments, and it gives you a warning that you switch to higher performance power plant. I believe this command should do that. And now if I run this, yep, I do not see it. And if they run this command, it shows you that I have my setup to a high performance plan. So I just gave you a couple of examples. There are 232 rules. Hopefully, this gives you some idea that that what is the possibility in your environment, right? So let's move to the next one. I'm not going to run this notebook. If you're in a hurry, if you just want to get a sense of this thing, and I did not write this, I put a comment here. I copied this from this GitHub repo that's maintained by Microsoft. And a quick start guide is here. It has enough comments. You can play with it. The one I'm going to show you that has all this stuff. So I'm just going to skip this. I put this here for if someone do not have time to go through this, doesn't have time to review, they have a quick guide to go through this. But this is where we will be spending most of the time. And again, put your questions if I'm going too fast, if you have any comments, and put in the chat. So these are two PowerShell commands that we'll be using. One is to run the assessment, as you probably saw. I already ran it a few times. And this command is if I do not want to run the assessment, but I still want to see what are the rules that qualify for the resource that I want to run the rule against, or in that context, you can get a list of the commands without running those, right? Or you can get a list of the rules without running the rules. For both of these, I think this is the version I was talking about before. The minimum version of the SQL Server module is this. So make sure you have that installed, then you get these two commands, and then you can use it once that module is loaded in your environment. I also put a URL here where you can see all the rules in JSON format. Both of these commands, I put a URL so you can go and read more about all the switches and the options available with those two commands. And I put some note about setup. Again, I want to make sure that I mention I did not write this from scratch. I actually downloaded this from here, and then I made some modification with a little bit more details for people to follow. So I'm going to import my module. And just one warning here is if you do not have your XP command shell enabled, and not that I'm advocating you should have it enabled, you probably should not for security reason, you will get these two warnings. And I did reach out to the product team about this, and they are aware of it because Microsoft's recommendation is not to have XP command shell turn on, and now you have these commands to run that you need the XP command shell. So it's kind of contradictory, right? So what do you do? And Microsoft is aware of it. So if you read this, this is a code that I literally got from them. So they're working on it to use WMI and register on the local and remote machines with the .NET API. And so that will give you opportunity to run these rules without turning on XP command shell. So just keep that in mind. So the first one, right? I'm getting my SQL instance name and I'm saying invoke SQL assessment. So what it's going to do, I do not have any filter on my invoke command, either with the ID or with tag or anything. So it's going to run all the commands that are for a server level scope against my local instance, right? So let's go through this. And again, that I'm not going to read the output, right? Because that's not the scope. As you see here, it gives me my scope, and it also checked that my agent service is stopped and browser has been stopped. So it skipped some of the rules to run against those. And you can run the same command. I put 5 more options. I'm not going to run this, but all of this works and give you the same thing. Now, I talked about a virtual machine in Azure. If you want to run, you can run this. So this is the command you use. I know I'm just using a public IP address. This is probably not the best way, but just for demo purpose, if you want to test, you can spin up a SQL Server on Azure VM, get the public IP and run this. I'm sure you're not going to, expose your public IP to the whole world. You're probably going to use a private endpoint, so you can have a credential, and you can use that, to connect. But this command will get you going, and you can run that. You can evaluate a SQL Server running on Azure Virtual Machine. So we went to a server level. We looked at how you can run it against Azure VM. How about database, right? I want to run this rule set against a single database. You can do it this way. So this is again my local instance. I'm passing the name of the database that I want, and then I said invoke SQL Assessment against that database. Again, I'm not filtering any rules, so that means run all the rules that are applicable at a database scope against my wild world importers. And as you can see on the top, it gives us the scope and give you all the rules and warnings and all that. There's two other options. You can run the same command with these two. I'm not going to do that. If you want to run it against all your user databases, right, or all the databases in instance, you can do that, right? So here I'm saying, get SQL database, passing my instance name, and then calling invoke SQL Assessment. I'm not going to run this because it takes a while. It will go through all the databases in my instance. So I don't see any questions, so I'll just move on. Now we talked about that there may be instances that I do not want to run the rules, but I just want to see a list of the rules that apply, right? So that's the command that I showed you before, get SQL Assessment item. Here I'm not running it, but I can pass my scope. So here my scope is server instance. So I'm saying, show me all the rules applicable to this resource that if I run, that will be checked, right? So these are the list of the rules, and I'm not checking at this time. And if you want to see all the rules for a master database, you can also do that, right? So this is only going to give me the rules that are applicable to the master database without running the rules. And I can also pass other, switches, right? Other variables. So here I'm saying run all the rules against my local instance, but give me the minimum severities warning. What this will do? This will filter out all the ones that categorized with information. And if I think that's too much, I just want to see if there is any rules that's critical against my local instance. And there is not, because there's only two critical rules. I think there is scope is database. That's why you don't see anything. I talked about tag before, if you remember, right? And here we can use that. What I'm saying, in the scope of a server, give me all the rules that has a tag with chase flag. So this will only give me the rules that has the tag with trace flag. So we saw how we can just run the rules without looking at those. Now we saw how we can get a list of the rules. Now, how can we combine these two? We'll look at that. But before I go there, I said I can run rules with filter, right? So here, I just want to run this one rule just to see if my XP command shell is on, right? And I do not get anything because I think my my XP command shell is turned off. So let's turn this on just for demo purpose. And now you see, now we get a warning, right? And if we go and disable it, run this again, it's clean. I can also use a tag. This is the ID. I'm now using a tag of backup, right? I want to check all the rules for backup, and later on you come back to these rules, how we can modify. So here it's saying I have this bunch of databases that doesn't have a full backup for last 7 days. I know there are other T-SQLs you can run, right? I'm sure all of you have checks against your backup if it failed and all whatnot. But if you're a consultant, you're going to a new place. I know people have, reservation to run third-party, tools and stuff, right? Or third-party products. You can see, this is Microsoft. You can run this one command against 1,000 servers or databases and see, how is their backup? Is it in compliance or not? And you can modify these rules. Like I said, we'll come back to this. So there is a question from Annie. Earlier, you mentioned about loading the rule set into your local DB. Will it work without it, or is it required? Example, you only have PS module SQL Server. It's a very, very good question. So Annie is saying, I showed before at the beginning, I said I loaded this into a SQL Server table. Is it required to run this? Actually, it is not. I only loaded it to just even for my own sake, right? To see what are these rules, are these, what version these are applicable, what are the categories, what are the tags. I just want to have a little bit better sense, right? Because looking at a big CSV file or a JSON, I cannot make a sense out of it. Being a person working with SQL Server, I thought that's my best bet, right? Here, I'm not using that. I'm just running the rules against my SQL Server, but I'm not using that table at all, Annie. So you do not have to load that. As long as you load the PowerShell modules, SQL Server module with that minimum version, you are all set to go. And I'll show you other alternatives to run that. Hopefully that answered your question. So I did that. I loaded that, like I said, just to show you folks and for my own knowledge, like what I'm dealing with. Okay, Hemant has a follow-up question. Can you create and add new rules? Where do you save them? So hold on to that, Hemant. If I do not answer that, come back to me. So we are getting there. So the question is, can you create and add new rules? We can create our new rules. We can add new rules. We can also edit the rules. We can override these rules. We'll take a look. Francis has a question. Is there an official Microsoft document link that has the list of best practices? I know there is a lot of blogs out there, but most are conflicting. Yes, there is. So if I so Francis, these rules are this is rules and samples on GitHub. If you go there, you will see all the rules. This is a good reading. This is the landing page for SQL Assessment API. There is a video also. So your best place is here. Rules and samples on GitHub from Microsoft. Francis, go there. So once you download my code, you can you can go from there. I have put the URLs there. Anything else? Okay, so let's move on. I want to get to what Hemant asked is, that's important, how to get to, how you can modify and do all that. So interest of time, I'm going to skip a few things. Okay. Okay, so this is where I can combine both commands, right? Here I'm saying, get me the item and then run those. And I can decide which one I want to run. There's a cool thing with PowerShell. If you don't know, look at out grid view. I'm not going to talk about this, but let's take a look how this works. I'm running this. And I should be getting a, yep. Now this is a grid view. I can choose, I can see all the rules here. And just for, I'm just picking up randomly, I can say, okay, I just want to assess this 3. If I hit OK, it just assesses those 3 rules for me out of all the rules that I could see. So this is another cool trick. I like it. Now, we've been looking at the rules, the output in the screen, right? What will happen if I am running this against 1,000 servers? This is all going to be like, bloated, right? Millions of lines, and how do I make sense out of it? So again, for me, I mostly work with SQL Server, MongoDB. I can send it to a SQL Server table, right? So I do not want to see the output here. I want to save it because then I can go and aggregate and do all that, right? And this is probably you want to do, right? At your workplace, run it on the first day, save it, and then every week run it, make some report, and you can even, brag about it, right? Go to your boss and say, I had this many thousand rules who are not compliant. Now, it's getting down to this. So we saved it there. Now, if I go take this T-SQL, I can see this here, right? That what we ran through and the result. And it gives me my, what server I ran it against and all that. So, so this is how you can save your output. This is the question Hemant was asking. We are into the customization, right? And again, right, I put a lot of comments for you. So please read those because there are some prerequisites to bring your own rules, write your own rules, and refresh it. So, make sure you read those and follow those before you try these things. Again, here I'm just declaring some variables, so I do not have to come and type those all the time. So I'm running this full backup rule set, right? It says I do not have full backup for last 7 days. How about I want to have my full backup every 3 days for whatever reason, just random picking it up, right? So this will be where I'm going to, have my custom rules. Hemant, you asked a question, where do you save, right? So it's up to you. You have to have a path to refer to that. And now I have a rule said full backup override.json. So let's look at that. What is that? So here I'm saying I have a rule with the ID full backup. I don't have an override type. And what's the override? The threshold is 3, right? So simple. Now I'm referring to that file from my sample path, right? And I do not need to declare it. I can type it every, the full path, but that probably will be cumbersome, right? If you keep all in one place and if you refer to it, I just put in a variable. Now look at that. Now it's checking against 3 days, right? Before the default was 7 days. And take it one step further. I said, okay, all the databases are good. I want to have full backup every, once in 7 days, but there's only one. I want to have it every 3 days. So I can do that too. Now I have an override on my override. So let's look at that. I put a filter here. Right? Again, ID is full backup override, threshold is 3 days, but the threshold has a filter, means only for this database. Here we saw we got warning for 3 days for every database. Now if you see here, it's checking all database for 7 days, but for that one database, it's checking for 3 days. Let me get rid of some of the outputs just so it's easier for me. So it makes sense, hopefully. Same way, max memory, right? If you go to the SQL Server blogs, best practices, like someone commented that Francis said, I know there's a lot of blogs out there and most are conflicting. Totally agree with you, Francis. You have to know, I have a couple of folks that I trust. I mostly read theirs. And if people are from Microsoft, PFE, they don't, on the CSS team, cat team, and there is a tiger team at Microsoft. Pedro Lopez used to work there. I'll try to, constrain myself within those. Memory is one thing, right? Max memory, right? So you will see all over, and you might have servers that are, edge case that, the standard recommendation doesn't fit. I can give you an example. If you have a lot of CLR code running against your SQL Server, you probably want to leave more memory for your operating system compared to your other standard environments, right? So you can do that. So I'm not going to run this. I have a max memory override, same concept as the backup override. Disabling and enabling rules, right? Can I disable a rule? Can I enable a rule? Yes, I can. So yeah, okay, Hemant, you said excellent. So I'm also, but I didn't answer your question fully. I didn't show you a new rule. I showed you override. We'll get to the new rule. Hopefully we have time. So here I can say, I want to disable this one rule. I know my baseline, I know my environment, I know Microsoft is saying that I should have it disable or enable, but I have a edge case, I need that. So I don't want this to show up in my assessment every time. And all of these, actually, I didn't write all of this. I'll be upfront with you. These are already in the sample page. If you go there, you can download most of these. You can download. I haven't wrote this. Some of those I wrote, but most of it is there. Download, use it. It's from Microsoft, so you can pretty much give an ID, override, and here I don't give threshold. I'm just saying enable is false. As simple as that. So you can have a file with all this, and then when you run your rule, you just join that, and it's not going to run those rules for you. Right now, like I do not see it, right? So if I go and turn on this trace flag, if I go other way, I should have a piece of code. Yep, right here. And now maybe I did it other way. Turn on trace flag 634 using this. That should, oh, maybe I did not even. Okay, I'll take a look at that. Okay, here you can see that. Sorry, I was running the wrong one. This will not be invoked. But here, as you can see that now we're going to get a warning, right? Because we turned it on. So let me revert this before I. Okay, so we still have 9 minutes. I want to get to a new rule. So I'm going to skip this too. And there are other ways, right here, I'm disabling all trace flags with this. Anything with the, so as you can see, all false. Now, the reason I wanted to show this is the next script. I can say disable all trace flag and then enable the one with the performance tag. So you can mix match. That's my point. So you can see some are true, some are false, right? So there are, you can be creative. That's kind of the point. So think about it, what's your need, and based on that, do that. So here you come with a new rule, right? How can I bring a new rule? Again, let me run this. and custom rule T-SQL probe. So let's look at that file. Sorry. This is a brand new rule. This doesn't come with Microsoft rule set, the default rule set. What this is saying, it's if you this should be familiar. It's just looking at a free space for the database files from dbo.sys files, and it's saying I should have 25% of free space. Right? I'm not going to go through all the other stuff. We just do not have time. And now, when I run this, as you can see, it's giving me a warning that I only have 14% free space. Now, I wrote the rule with 25%, and then I ran it. You know, the money is tight, and you know, the company doesn't want to spend money right now. So I want to override that. I want to override on my new rule also. Right? I have a 25%. That's too much. We cannot afford that. So I want to override that. So why can't this stay in the same place? Okay. So I had a T-SQL probe and custom rule threshold change, right? Now I'm referring that rule, which is this ID, and now I'm saying bring it down to 10%. I do not, you know, I do not need the 25% anymore. So now if I run this, you do not see that warning, right? That you saw here, because I overrode that threshold with a 10%. Okay, there are other ways. That was a T-SQL rule. You can write rules with the shell commands, PowerShell. You know, I put enough like a description here, and you can always, you know, open these rules and see, like, this checks your execution policy. So maybe I can just run it. For your PowerShell execution policy in your environment, right? Is it set right or is it not set right? There's also some other one with the WMI. There's one to check all your files. It doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be database files for a certain size, right? If you're running out of disk space, if you want to see if someone put a file, you know, saved like a trace file, some diagnostics files, and they're large size, you can just run this. I do not remember which rule set is that. It's probably this one. I don't. Yeah. Findings files bigger than 15 megabyte, but you can customize it. I just have this for a demo purpose, I think. And if you open that, you can always change the size. You know, 15 megabyte is probably, you know, very tiny. You can make it, you know, for large size files. You can search for it. So let me go back to see where we are with this. Okay, so the last one I talked about the extension, right? No, I actually want to show you something else. Yeah, this one is important. So far what we have done is we always ran it against a single database and a single server, right? How about if I have hundreds and thousands? I'm combining a Dba Tools with Sql Server Module. If any of you doesn't know what is Dba Tools, I put a URL here. Please take a look. It's a open source project by the community. Very handy. If you're working with SQL Server and Azure SQL, please, I would highly recommend to look at this, especially if you're doing migration. Your life, like you want to copy a job to T-SQL job to your other replica nodes, right? What do people do? They script it out, they go and run, they change it here, they have to go change it there, right? There's one command you can just copy all your jobs across, all your replicas in an always on availability group. It's phenomenal, and there's full sessions on this topic. Okay, so enough about that. And then if you do not know what is a CMS, Central Management Server, I'm using here. So here I'm getting my CMS server name and a group name, and you do not have to group it, but I always like to start running stuff from dev, QA, UAT, and prod, right? So you don't want to go and just run it against prod, you want to test it. If you do not use CMS server, which is absolutely okay, you can pass a CSV file with all your server names, or if you have a DBA database with all the server names, you can point there, and then you can just run a for each loop. And I'm actually writing this all to a SQL Server table. So now I can run this against hundreds, thousands of servers, databases, write the result in a SQL Server table, go there, put a Power BI report or a SSRS report, and I can, have some color coding, each server, how many warning and whatnot. I can even, drill down with the individual ID, how many servers doesn't comply with that rule ID or tag or whatever. You get my point. And I actually put some point here because, it all depends, how you do this. You can move your results to archive table, compress the table. You can purge your rule set, saying I don't want to keep the output more than a year or so. So whatever you want to do. So enough of that. I do not see any other questions. So I'm just going to go to my last thing. There is a extension. So whatever I showed you so far, right? It's all needs some coding. You have to write 1 or 2 lines of code, and you say, I do not want to do anything. I do not want to get your PowerShell module. I don't know anything. Just download this extension in Azure Data Studio, SQL Assessment. Make sure it's enabled. Then what you can do, you can go to your server pane. Once you have a server, you will see the SQL Assessment button. Click that. Let me hide this so you can get some rule. I can invoke assessment. I can also see the rules. These are the 2 PowerShell commands we've been talking about. Just click that button, you're done. It is now doing the assessment against the server and all the databases. Now I know if you have 1,000 of this, you have to do one by one. Again, go back to the the one I showed you. Now this will do once it finishes, I'll show you a couple of things. So meantime, I want to be respectful for the next speaker, so I'll definitely finish at 7:55 for everything. Put your questions in the chat. By the time it runs, you can use that time to answer some questions, comments, concerns. Is there an extension for SSMS? SSMS is not an extension-based tool. My company doesn't allow Azure Data Studio currently. Very interesting, Liz. I'm probably not pronouncing your name correctly. The full name is Lizzie. I'd be really curious why your company doesn't allow Azure Data Studio. It's a Microsoft product. No, SSMS is not an extension-based tool. So to answer your question, it's a no. But you do not have to use Azure Data Studio. If you do not want to use extension, you can, I don't know what you use for PowerShell. ISE, if you're using PowerShell ISE, I don't know if you know that Microsoft is not doing any more development on that. So I don't know if you're using Azure Data Studio or what is the other tool mostly developers use, Azure, sorry. I don't know if you use Visual Studio Code. You can use any of those to run the PowerShell command, right? Or just open PowerShell prompt and use it. So, but you cannot use this extension, right? What I showed you. But I'm surprised with your comment. I don't know your company, their business. Maybe I'm sure they have valid reason, but I've never heard from anyone that their company is opposed to allow Azure Data Studio anyway. So now it ran against all the databases and servers. If you want to see the rules just for the servers, you can click. I say, I just want to see what happened to my wildward importers. So now you can filter it, and as you can see, for each one, you get you get all the details at the bottom. It's pretty cool. Take up the filter, clear. I get all the rules set, right? The good part is you can export this. So first, let me do this. Create HTML report, right? So if you're a consultant, I do not do consulting, but if you are, how cool this will be. You go to a new place, you run this, and give them the HTML report. These are a couple of things that Microsoft recommend you fix. If you want to get a script, you can set this in a table, which I showed you. They give you a whole script with a table definition. You just have to point it to a database, and it will save everything there. Where was I? Okay, I was here. You can get your history of the previous runs, and this can also take you to the GitHub repo that I've been talking about. Someone asked, Microsoft. So this is their landing page, about the SQL Assessment API, and there are other URLs that I showed you. You can also, if you see a bug, you can, put a comment here, give them feedback. If you're looking for a new rule, give them feedback. They're very receptive of our feedback. So I think I've talked enough. I'm going to put up my contact page again. I know we went very quick. Okay. Any other questions, please? Questions, comments, last 2 minutes. Even on my presentation, if you think some of the stuff I showed, I should present it in a different way, because I have a couple of other places I'm going to show this. A lot of people doesn't know about this. So product team definitely appreciate, we are spreading the news. So yeah. Annie, you're welcome. Yeah, said thank you, very useful, good. Looking forward to my GitHub link. Oh, do not download this right now, but because I'm going to make sure that I have all the the latest and greatest in the GitHub, because I made some. Again, you just have to remember that one word. If you go to GitHub, SQL Worldwide, and SQL Assessment. So I'll refresh this. I'll see if I, what are the changes I made, and then download everything. So I can probably put it in the chat, I'm sure. Yeah. Okay, so it's 55. If you have no other question, I'm going to hand it back to Pio. And again, thank you for the opportunity. Thanks to all of you for coming and listening to me. This is an honor. I don't take it lightly, when you come to listen to me. So hopefully I'll see you in a bigger event, and good luck.
All right. Thank you, Tar. So, yeah, it's very useful. I think most people find it informative. Yeah, regarding the comment, if you don't have Azure Data Studio, it's running on PowerShell, so you'll be able to run the module. If you have the SQL Server module and you have the command, you should be able to. So that's very, yeah, that's very nice. Let me just do this. All right, so that's SQL Assessment Microsoft Best Practice Checker from Tao.